This is Isaac Morehouse. Welcome to the podcast where we discuss education, entrepreneurship, big ideas, how to put them into practice in the real world, and above all, how to live free. All right, today I am joined by Taylor Foreman. Taylor is a current Praxis participant in the Praxis program that I've mentioned on here before. You can find more about it at discoverpraxis.com. Taylor is, through the program, working with a startup in the health industry, kind of health tech, if I remember correctly. He's doing sales, traveling all over for them. He is a philosopher, he's a writer, and he's an aspiring entrepreneur. Taylor, is that an accurate description? How would you describe yourself?
That would be me when I'm feeling good about myself. So yeah.
What would you call yourself on an average day?
Maybe just like an aspiring philosopher, just a bad philosopher.
Well, see, that's always a question I have about being a philosopher. Like when can you call someone a philosopher? Where's the line?
Yeah, I don't know. There's probably some interesting philosophy about that unfortunately I don't know about.
We might have to do a show about that sometime. What counts? So you are living in Austin. You're traveling a lot for your business partner, Vital Interactive, and you're doing sales. Is that right?
It's Vital Interaction.
Interaction. Yeah. I'm sorry, Vital Interaction.
No problem. Yeah, it's kind of like my proper title is lead generation specialist. So that means I go out and I try to get people interested in setting up a meeting with one of our salesmen proper. But it's cool because I get to work on it. It's interesting going into a bunch of different practices and saying my bit and trying to figure out the best way to say it and watching people's reaction. It's like this experiment I get to perform because you see that like this sentence or whatever it might be causes this reaction almost like 95% of the time. And I find that interesting. I've never had an opportunity to do something like that before.
If you have the mental stamina for sales, especially sort of cold type sales, if you can handle the level of, getting ignored and rejected, but mostly ignored and the ups and downs that come with it, it is such a fascinating experience of like sort of getting an understanding of people's psychology, of your own. You realize how much we take for granted the human ability to translate ideas and feelings into words, and you realize how hard that actually is if you don't already have a whole bunch of shared knowledge and assumptions. I don't know. I've always found it to be a really kind of rewarding if you can treat it as a game and not get too down about the challenges. So do you watch the scene from Glengarry Glen Ross every day to pump yourself up with Alec Baldwin?
No, I don't even know what that is.
Come on, you don't know Always Be Closing? All right.
Oh, I've heard about that.
All right, this is inexcusable. Okay, when we're done with this podcast, I'll send you the link. You're gonna have to go watch Glengarry Glen Ross scene, Alec Baldwin. It's a speech he gives to a bunch of sales guys. It's amazing.
Okay, I actually, now that you say it, I think my only exposure to this has been from The Office.
Yeah, I'm sure they have parodied it. I gotta say, I feel like Praxis has failed you, that you're already a month and a half into the program and you haven't seen this yet. We're gonna remedy this. Okay, so the topics of today, though, we have 3 topics that we want to discuss, and these were things you mentioned to me that you were interested in coming on and talking about, and I find them to be really interesting topics myself. So first is the value of art. Second is whether or not you can really get anywhere by not doing stuff that you hate. That's something that I've written about. I talk about a lot. Don't do things that you hate. And I don't know if I want to go so far as to say you're going to challenge that notion, but at least discuss where does long-term and short-term fall in? How much do you have to do things you hate in order to get to do things that you love? And how do you make those decisions? And then the final topic is psychedelics. And I'm really, really interested in discussing all 3 of these. So I'll let you pick, man. Which one do you want to start with?
We could start with what I was just thinking about, kind of like in the back of my head while I was listening to you, was doing stuff you don't like. That was like so I think that's the topic we should start with.
Let's jump in. So I'll just recap briefly things that I've written and shared a lot about this. And my essential philosophy is don't do things you don't like doing, and make a list mentally, physically of things you know you hate, and work every day to eliminate and reduce the number of those that you do. And everything else is fair game, and that will help you sort of craft out and create a life that you enjoy. Does that rub you the wrong way?
It doesn't. It really doesn't. But I think that what I want to kind of get at, and I think that if we were like diametrically opposed on this, we would just be getting into like an argument of semantics. So I think we should just kind of talk about the semantics and sort of flesh out what everything really means. Because I think the question I have, or maybe the reservation that I have is when you should do things that obviously you can't just be a hedonist where you just constantly short-term pleasure seeking. I think we can both agree on that. And so sometimes you have to do things for long-term gratification, and that requires training, sometimes hardship. But I think that's a little bit obvious. So I want to know what you think about that, and what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the dangers and challenges with words and with writing and expressing ideas, because no matter how you do it, there's no way to do it in a way that covers all possible misunderstandings and exceptions. And I've had a lot of people sort of respond with like, oh, okay, fine. So just like, sleep all day and get drunk and, what? I'm not doing anything I hate. I hate getting up in the morning, so I won't do that. And I think to me, there's this confusion about not doing things you hate and not doing things that are hard. And I think the real key is a tremendous amount of self-knowledge and self-honesty. And if we're really honest and we really sort of examine our own experiences, the times when we are the least bored and the most fulfilled, because I equate boredom with things that I hate. I think most people do. The least bored, the most fulfilled is often when we're doing something that's a challenge, something that's hard work, and something that actually took a lot of willpower to get started at. You might experience this if you are into exercising a lot, when you're in the middle of a run or a workout and you're really enjoying it, or if you're building something, you're writing something, you're working on a project, even if you're out at a social event and it took a little bit of courage to make yourself get up and decide to go out instead of just staying home and do your hair or whatever else. But I think hard work, doing things that are difficult and challenging, that's not the same as doing things that you hate. In fact, I would usually say they're often opposites. It doesn't mean just because you're doing something hard, it's something that you enjoy. But most things that we enjoy actually take work, not only to get there, but often even in the process themselves. So that's one thing. But I would also say, when I use words like things you hate or things you enjoy, I'm sort of using it in a sort of cosmic sense. I mean in some kind of sense that incorporates, that understands your long and short term self-interest. And you're sort of looking at, okay, even if in this moment, I really hate, brushing my teeth, there's something that I hate even more than that. And that's going to the dentist and paying for a cavity. So I'm still trying to avoid something I hate. I'm just incorporating knowledge of more than my present condition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's my experience almost exactly. I'm much happier, getting up early in the morning and doing something that's hard, and I've learned that about myself. But I think that two interesting areas of discussion that could arise are, okay, for example, do you know people that refuse to eat anything but for maybe like chicken tenders or French fries, something like that? You know people like that?
I've run into people that seems to kind of be their MO. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure.
Right. And it seems like sometimes if parents don't force their children against their free will to, and this is just to a thought experiment, force their children to eat food that an undeveloped palate doesn't like, then they never really develop a liking for anything besides just fat, salt, and sugar. And so that's an interesting thought, I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't actually find it very compelling that humans won't do, because the sort of assumption underneath there is that humans won't do things that are good for them unless they're forced to by someone else. And I find that not very compelling for a variety of reasons. One is just observation. Absent any force or coercion, if you kind of let your kids be, for example, learning, you don't need to force them to learn. You don't need to force them to learn to read. They'll teach themselves when they see that it's beneficial and valuable to themselves. And this is observed all over the place. Once you make it something that's forced, I almost feel like they have more of a reaction or rebellion against it, because now they haven't discovered for themselves why it's beneficial. They've only discovered that some authority figure wants them to and believes that they have to. And it kind of deprives them from learning from experience, learning from the pain of dealing with that problem on their own. So I think providing them with an environment that has a lot of options and resources for them, and letting them sort of internalize the costs and benefits to the greatest extent possible is preferable to just saying they're never going to do the right thing. I'm going to force them to. The other problem with it is it assumes too much about the person doing the forcing. It assumes that they have more knowledge than I think they really have about somebody's long-term interest. Okay, so if you're going to go on something like healthy food, maybe 50 years ago, people would have, done the food pyramid and forced that on their kids. Today, most people are pretty skeptical of the health claims there, right? So right. I think anything that kind of has that imposed structure has some of its own risks. But I do think, I take my own kids, I sort of have to fight with them about brushing their teeth every night. And my thing is, look, I pay for your dental care, and I don't want to pay for a whole bunch of cavities and stuff. And I don't think you want to go get a shot and have people drilling in your mouth. So that's the deal. And if you want me to have to use my money on your dental care instead of on, a new game for the Wii or whatever, right? That's not a very good trade-off for any of us. And even though sometimes with my kids when they're young, I kind of have to just, say, all right, open your mouth, I'm going to brush your teeth, you have no choice or whatever. For the most part, if you at least attempt to use negotiation and reason as much as possible and make it about trade-offs and costs and benefits, I don't know. I think that's preferable. But I want to ask you a question. So give me an example. Do you have times where you believe that you have to keep doing something that you hate doing, or you were forced to, and you think that was a better outcome, that produced a better outcome for you?
Yeah, actually, but I'm a little skeptical about why exactly, because I agree with you. I agree with you about what you said, and I think you said it well. But I there's a few times in my life. For instance, I hated Boy Scouts growing up, and I was forced to do Boy Scouts, and I would do these hikes and camping, and I absolutely hated it, and I never wanted to do it. And I finally was given the opportunity to quit, and I did. And then later I rejoined on my own free will and started to enjoy it. Now I enjoy camping and things like that. But I think the thing about it is that the things that I really hated doing, I seem to have gained something from. But my instinct on it is probably more aligned with you, is that, as humans, we kind of have an ability to make the best of whatever's happening to us. So if you have to sort of look back and rationalize being forced to do something, as long as it's not, doesn't damage you for life, I think that you tend to sort of say, well, that was worth it if you're sort of an optimistic person, which I kind of consider myself to be.
Yeah, it's hard to. I face this as a parent all the time. Oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
No, that was I was gonna just ramble. Go ahead.
Now I'll ramble. No, but because I want to get your take on this too, because okay, I have children. You don't. Do you plan to have children someday?
Yeah.
Would you like to? Okay. So this is something you can consider and give me your thoughts on. Because I think you can never know. We're not able to sort of prove or disprove a counterfactual, right? So right. My mom made me take piano lessons for a certain number of years, and it's easy to point to the ways that I benefited from that. Even though I didn't enjoy it, and as soon as she let me quit, I quit. And like you, then I returned on my own free will to piano and enjoyed it. It's easy to say, okay, but I benefited. But, who knows what would have happened if I hadn't been forced to? Maybe I would have benefited in some other way. Like I could foresee, well, what if my mom forced me to take fencing classes my entire life and I hated it? And by the end of it, I could say, here are 5 ways that I benefited from fencing classes. Well, yeah, I could have benefited from whatever else I was doing too, right? So it's hard to know, but with your own kids, it's, you'll see sometimes, and again, you can't ever know someone else's level of happiness, I guess, but you'll see, I was watching a football game and I don't remember who it was, but there was a quarterback and he was in an interview and he said, yeah, growing up, I really wanted to downhill ski and do this, but I never could because my dad would get me up at like 5:30 every morning and take me out to throw the football. And he kind of had this like glazed over look in his eyes. And he's like, but, I'm glad that's what got me here today. But it almost was like, this guy had no childhood. Right. Okay, so you can say, oh, yeah, life's real tough. Now he's making millions and he's playing a sport and he'll get to retire when he's 40 and he'll be set for life. But like, I don't know that necessarily equates to a better life. My brother and I will joke about this. Like, if any of our kids show potential, we're like, maybe we should just go like hardcore and just force them to be like great athletes or whatever it is, and we joke about it. We wouldn't do that. But we've sometimes wondered like, yeah, but if you knew that forcing a kid to do something for a certain period of time that they hated would result in them being like a master at it, you see some potential they have and they could make millions and whatever else, is that a case of, look, I just know more about what's going to make them happy than they do? Or is that a case of, yeah, even if they're making millions, like, who knows, maybe they're not happy. I don't know. Where do you draw that line of doing something that's forcing your kids to do something that you think is good for them?
This is something that I was also really interested in talking about, and it's when do you have to do something that's better for like the general society? So like the guy who plays football, like he's going to make more money as a football player because that's the trend of society, and in that is life nothing but trying to always calculate risk and reward. And does that mean always letting everyone be free? And I think that you would probably have some interesting thoughts about that.
Yeah, the case of the guy playing football. So I would actually argue that is a case of he is chasing the thing that creates value for society rather than himself.
Right.
Because the amount of money you can make is a reflection of the amount, if it's a free market, of the amount that other people value your product. And so if all you chase is the highest salary, that's actually a way of chasing what produces the most value to society. I don't think anyone has an obligation to do that. I don't think
that... Well, it could be just I don't know, this kind of an ill-formed thought, but it could be just a self-fulfilling prophecy. Football players are following football player and promoting football playing, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I don't think most people who go to play football or do any job that they think can command them the highest salary. Most people are not doing it because they think that's what will do the most good for society. But in reality, right, in terms of value creation, wherever you can command the most profit is where you will create the most value. But I think I don't think that an individual owes anything to society. Society is an entity that it can't. It's a concept. It can't act. It can't. It bears no responsibility. It has no obligations, and therefore I don't think any individuals have obligations to it. What would you say on that?
Well, I think we could go at length about that, but I think we could go for like an edge case.
And well, let's make it personal. Let's make it personal.
Yeah. Okay. So like, what if
you owe something to society?
I think that I do. But I think that it's sort of an abstraction that I keep for myself, and I don't necessarily think that everyone ought to go out and do exactly the way I would want to do them.
How does that play out for you? Like, so you have a feeling that, what does it mean to you to feel that you owe something to society, I guess?
I think that creating value in unexpected ways is a way of benefiting society. So not just like following, being a football player because that's the current high value proposition that society kind of deems important, but maybe changing the way that people value things, but or being a moral consumer.
So let's say you choose to do something because you think it's going to be good for society. So that's why you choose to do it. Why is doing what's good for society something that you want to do? What kind of feeling does it give you? What makes you choose that over something else?
I guess it would just make me feel good. I think that doing things, I think living an outward life, I mean, obviously it all kind of comes back to how it makes you feel, but I think that it's empirically proof, maybe not empirically, but you could show that people are generally happier and more fulfilled when they focus on their energy on trying to create value for other people or make other people's lives better, easier, or you know.
Yeah. So see, that comes back to my whole point about the self-knowledge. So what we're really saying is self-interest, properly understood, right? Properly understood is what drives your actions, and it's in our self-interest, properly understood. We feel better when we're doing things that benefit other people, that create value for other people, and whether that's something sort of traditionally labeled selfless, like taking a low-paying job to go work at a soup kitchen or something like that, or whether it's something that's not labeled that way. At the end of the day, it's about our own self-interest. But when we really understand our self-interest, we start to discover weird things, like most of the time we actually feel better when we're making other people feel better as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that people who, I don't want to make it personal like that, but I think that there's a misunderstanding.
There's some real jerks out there. I'm not going to name names.
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. Self-interest, properly understood, leads to a better and more unified, if you want to call it society, that's fine. But I think that people will live their entire lives without their self-interest understood. And I think that if we improperly, you try to avoid these like pretentious unifying pronouns. People will be immoral capitalists, I think, in my personal opinion. They'll act against their better self-interest their entire lives. They'll end their lives being very unhappy, but in order to justify what they've done, they'll glamorize it, and then other people will do the same thing, and then people do it, endlessly, because everybody's trying to justify the way that they're currently living their life. So I think it's definitely important to, however you want to call it, society, to make sure that we're definitely trying to be philosophical people, trying to understand our self-interest better, and also trying to go against the grain of society at large in certain aspects where people are making it seem like poor choices are actually the good ones, just like in sort of like a retrospective sort of justification.
Yeah, I actually think that one of the areas where there's the biggest problem is anything deemed altruistic or charitable or a lot of nonprofit and government programs. I actually find my belief is that many of those are the most sort of short-term self-interested, the most disconnected with the concept of sort of long-term self-interest, and there's the most dishonesty involved, lack of awareness of one's own sort of purposes and motives, and lack of transparency about that, in that as long as you can say it's a nonprofit or it's something done for the good of others, whether it actually results in that and whether that's why you're actually doing it, you get social points for it. So you get a whole bunch of psychic benefit. And so it incentivizes people to do a whole lot of signaling, where they're just signaling, hey, like me because I do good things, and that person is bad because they do bad things. And anytime it's obvious that something is in someone's self-interest, we sort of look down on it. And then we do anything that can easily be construed as, oh, that's not in their self-interest. We sort of say, oh, well, that's wonderful. And I think if we're really honest, if we really break it down, everything we do is in our self-interest. It's only a question of whether it's effective and whether we're being honest with ourselves and with others about it. I don't know. What would be your take on that? I know it gets sort of complicated if we start talking about these levels of deception and self-deception.
Yeah, I think that the self-absorbed charity person, I don't know, is that sort of caricature is sort of a reactionary to something that definitely is also bad on the other side, which is, like I was talking about, people misunderstanding what they truly want. And so I think I agree with you totally that that's bad self-interest, and they're just sort of trying to gain. A lot of them, again with this pronoun stuff, but a lot of them are trying to gain social points in sort of the exact same way that a lot of immoral capitalists are trying to just gain a bunch of real world points, money, and without really considering what they actually want and what would make them happy, and sort of realizing that other people's benefit, other people, like Adam Smith pointed out, that slavery is really, really inefficient, because people just don't work as hard when they're not happy, and that's happening. And I think that happens to a lesser degree over and over again, where we have people who are being exploited, and when they really there's no need for it. When they would work better, they would work happier if they. And I think that's showing that we have another revolution going on right now, where it's showing that like Google values their employees and they pay them well. They pay them what they're worth, and they listen to their ideas, and that creates more valuable for everybody altogether.
So how do you determine what someone's worth?
I think it's nearly impossible, but we're always trying.
What is it about Google that pays people what they're worth more than somebody else?
I think that Google realizes that happy employees work better and are less likely to cause long-term problems for them.
But you don't think that greedy capitalists who want to make as much money as possible realize that they could make more money by treating their employees better?
I think that they should. I think that they could and they should.
But you don't think they do, though, right now?
Sometimes they don't. I think that there is a disconnect. Like I was saying, you glamorize short-term gains, and that sort of takes hold in the zeitgeist and causes unnecessary loss.
Okay, so here's a conundrum for you. I guess a moral question, and again, let's just be, we're slightly imprecise with our terms here, but
right.
Who do you think would be a better person? Someone who is genuinely attempting to do good for the world, and let's say they start a charity or something very noble sounding like that, or they advocate for some sort of cause or something, but the results of what they do don't help anyone at all. In fact, they might make the very people they're trying to help, or some other unintended group of poor, disadvantaged people, might make them actually worse off. But the person is ignorant of this. They have genuinely good intentions, but their actions are actually resulting in worse. Or the person who is a total asshole, has no problem exploiting people, would do anything they can to make a buck and benefit themselves, but the results of their actions are actually benefiting the poor and the downtrodden and the very people that they hate. Which one is a better person?
I definitely think the latter, and I think that the latter even has sort of the problem with image on his side. Against him. He's seen as doing bad, but keeps doing it anyway, even though there's a sort of. But it's like we said, it's sort of imprecise because obviously these two people don't exist, but.
There's examples that are pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it means better too. In what way, right? Like better for me or for everyone else, or for outcomes that we believe are beneficial for society. Certainly, it's the asshole, right?
Right.
Has a better heart. It could be the person who's totally ineffective. There's a great quote by C.S. Lewis where he talks about moral busybodies that are always trying to control one for their own good, and he says they may in fact be more likely to go to heaven, but they're more likely to make a hell of earth. And I think that's a really interesting quote, that if you're ignorantly doing something you think is good for people out of good intentions, I don't know, like, if your heart in relation to some objective law of morality, maybe you have a good heart, but you're certainly not producing good in the world. And outcomes and intentions can be very, very different.
That's true. I think so. And I think back to your asshole. I think, well,
that was a strange transition.
Well, back to the asshole example. Let me word it like that. I think that he could be a better capitalist if he wasn't such an asshole. I think that's the goal.
That's a great insight. That's a great insight. The market in the long term, it doesn't reward that kind of attitude and image. Even if you're creating value, if people don't like you and perceive you as an idiot, you're going to not do as well as you could.
I think that another problem with this, and I think we're getting like straight up into like a capitalism debate. We might want to cut this short. But another thing that is a problem, even though I'm agreeing with you absolutely. I think another problem is that these short-term gainers are cutting their short-term gaining, and then they're getting out, and then they're affecting maybe the next person in line, or maybe they're affecting people, the next generation, or they're causing a lot of externalities. And I think that's something that people need to think about. I have a problem with that.
So give me an example of that.
So I don't know how you feel about this, but I think that a big problem that I have, or a big question that I'm kind of sorting through right now, I think, is when like even a good capitalist who's causing net gains for everybody, and I think that's great. I think capitalism is great because it, for a lot of reasons. Well, I won't get into it, but I have reservations about how it can cause undervaluation of natural resources and also externalities. So, and also in design obsolescence. So those are three things. There might be more, but those are the three that I'm kind of focused on right now. So we undervalue the natural resources, even land, and capitalists are very much incentivized to undervalue those, and that affects everybody else. And so they're not really paying for what they've got, and then they externalize costs.
Well, hold on. I gotta clarify on what you mean here. So,
okay.
Everyone is incentivized to undervalue something that they're buying and overvalue something that they're selling, but they can only do so if they have mutual agreement on the other end. What do you mean by undervaluing land?
I think that everybody is undervaluing it, even the person who is selling it. I think that's a problem because certain and a lot of natural resources like space and oil and a lot of things are finite, and and once it's used up or degraded, it's no longer valuable to anybody, and so the people selling it are not factoring that in, and the people buying it aren't either. I think it's a problem of
So what is in your mind the way to properly value a resource?
I have no idea. I have no idea at all. I think that's a good question.
Because I think value is subjective.
Yeah.
Economic value is totally subjective. There's no objective value for, an orange is not worth 15 utils objectively. It's worth what it's worth to whomever is willing to expend resources to obtain it. And that obviously differs dramatically with time and place. And in a free and unregulated market, you have a completely free-flowing price mechanism which communicates instantaneously the relative value of those resources compared to other resources people could obtain. And that has an ability, and this is where speculators serve such a vital role, where futures, and you can say, okay, those people, because if you're right, if land is currently undervalued, there's a ton of money to be made right now in the speculation game to say,
Yeah.
I can foresee down the road land will get more scarce and people aren't valuing it high enough now. If I buy it now when it's cheap, I can have that resource when its value goes up, right? And by buying a bunch now when it's cheap, you actually start to drive the price up right now, and you actually level out the market and bring up the value in the short term. That give and take of the market process, if it's unregulated, and that the market for land is ridiculously filled with a bunch of rent-seeking behavior and regulatory ways that people can curry favors. But if it is unregulated to the extent that it is, I think that reflects the best possible way of valuing land that's available to humans, that incorporates all the dispersed knowledge that's out there, both from sort of average people in the here and now, as well as experts who can foresee into the future. Would you disagree with that?
No, but with a small caveat, and you might have the answer there. That's very interesting to me. But the small caveat that I have is that once land has been, once finite natural resources have been undervalued and exploited, it's too late to value them properly because they're gone. And
that's true of any resource.
Yeah.
So the incentive is always there, again, if it's undervalued, to make money by buying it, preserving it, and then selling it when all of the other pieces have been destroyed, and you've got the one that's value is way up, and more people start doing that. That's what levels out. That's what levels out the market and communicates. I mean, prices are an incentive wrapped in information, and I think that is the best means available to humankind to properly allocate resources among diverse competing desires. Okay, so we went on a huge deviation on markets
we
here.
Did.
Which I actually like. We're gonna have to. We might continue this another time, but I want to hit on let's do this rapid fire, and maybe this isn't fair to the two other topics that we got, but hey, we'll go for it anyway. Give me your quick rundown on the value of art, and maybe this relates to some of the things we've already discussed, maybe not. The value of art. What that was one of the topics you mentioned to me. Give me your take.
Okay, I think the value of art is sort of like it balances people out. When you see art and you like it, I think it sort of it speaks to something that maybe you're not totally and you don't have as much as you would like to. So art that has serenity can be good to people living in big cities. Sort of balances out who they are. And I think that's great. But I'm curious, and this is just sort of a question that I had, and I'm going right back to markets, unfortunately. But I'm wondering what you think about can good art be sold? Because there's this idea that a sellout is bad, and I want to know what you think about the sellout. I'm sure you're familiar with what that whole culture around that. And can an advertisement ever be good? And there's some interesting questions around it, because art sort of is needed. It can't be asking you to like it. So and there's a lot of instances where great art has been undervalued when it was created and then properly valued later. And that's fine, I think. But can advertisement ever be good art? Because it's always asking you, hey, please like me. And that sort of makes it, that's kind of like, that's off-putting from it doesn't balance you out in any way. It just sort of, it asks you to buy more. And it sort of tries to create, it's sort of a racket, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's asking you to, it's creating a need in you that wasn't previously there.
So I actually would disagree with that. I don't think that's possible. I think if it was possible to create a need where one previously didn't exist, or a desire where one didn't exist, the person who could figure that out would be, sort of ruling the world. I think marketing is actually really beautiful. Not all of the ads or things produced that we call marketing are beautiful by any means, but neither is all of the art that's produced for supposedly other reasons. In fact, most of it's horrendous. Marketing creates value. So your experience of something, of a product, has as much to do with the actual ingredients, constituent parts of that product, as it does the setting you're in. There's this great TED Talk with this guy named Rory Sutherland. He's an ad guy. And he talks about this train in, I think it's in England, that they wanted to spend billions of dollars to make it a couple minutes faster in its cross country route.
Oh yeah, this was good.
Yeah, and he says, that's for half that you could have supermodels walking up and down the aisles serving, champagne, and your customers would be twice as happy. And that's really what marketing does. It creates value by creating an experience. Everything that we're purchasing it ultimately for the feeling. It makes us feel good. And I mean, if not, we would all just eat like the most basic form of sustenance there was and just have the most basic form of a survival shack, right? We're well beyond survival on the hierarchy of needs. And we're looking at things that give us certain feelings and give us other benefits. And the marketing that's wrapped around them is a big part of that. It creates that feeling. When you buy a truck, your enjoyment of it, the pleasure, the utility that truck brings you is enhanced every time you see a commercial with your truck driving through the mud. So it's actually creating value because the value is always subjective. So it has that potential, and it also, I think, is an example of a positive externality. How much marketing is just beautiful, well-designed art, or how many ads today are actually really funny and entertaining, and even if they're not communicating information to you about a product you want to buy, you get to benefit that they were created for somebody else. Or even the window displays at a department store they take a lot of time to decorate and put a Christmas tree in there. That's sort of creating a benefit that everyone gets to enjoy. So there's that component. But I also think art, fundamentally, it's really hard to draw a line between when someone is creating art in order to benefit from it, make a sale, or get prestige or money or something from it, and when they're sort of just creating it for its own sake. That's a really, really blurry line, because I would say the advertiser who makes a commercial for Swiffer WetJet, their goal is to increase sales, but they've got to give you some good feeling in order for you to want to, purchase something. Just like the artist who tries to make a living selling their paintings. Their goal is to sell, but they need to create in you a sense of beauty and appreciation, or they need to bring something to table to make that happen. And so that distinction is actually kind of hard to find. I'm really excited about this because you're going to get to, in the Praxis history module, there's a history of art section, and there is a lecture series in there by Paul Cantor, and I highly recommend it for everyone. It's called Commerce and Culture. And in the first lecture of the series, he says something really profound. He says, who was the first artist? He said the first artist was a business person. It was the guy who did a cave drawing. He said, think about this. You're in a subsistence village, and you've got to go out and hunt the mastodon or whatever it is for in a very, very high-risk activity in order to survive. And the first guy who convinced everyone else, hey, you guys go do the hard work of hunting. I'll stay back and paint in the caves. Basically, I'll make you look heroic and awesome in this picture if you go out there and do the work, and I don't have to go do that. It was an exchange. Yeah. And I think there's always an exchange going on with artists and their consumers, whether they're actually exchanging money or not. And I think kind of looking at that exchange as something dirty isn't very helpful to us. But there's still this question of staying true to your art, staying true to yourself. And that's something I think everyone struggles with, whether or not their art is for sale. I mean, I don't make money off of my blog, but there's always this question of, am I writing a blog post because I think it will make people happy and make them laugh, or am I writing it because it makes me happy? Or are those things too interconnected to tell a difference? I don't know. How do you distinguish? You write. Does that play in for you? Are you trying to please others, or are you trying to please yourself?
I'm absolutely trying to always focus on making sure I'm writing for what I want to write. I think that there's a lot of great writing out there. Even the one that I'm not sure if you recommended, but TK definitely did. The War of Art. It's you if you're ever sitting around thinking about how people are going to receive it, you're sort of banishing what your full potential as an artist. I think that that's really true, and I've kind of found that to be the case. Is that when I start thinking about it, it's like how are people going to like this? How is this going to be received? I'm suddenly not as creative. I'm not writing as well. I don't know what all that means in relation to like the larger picture, but I've just in my personal experience that's what I've found to be true. Um, and I think that people who do art following the markets, kind of like the football player, um, it's sort of it's pleasing to a large portion of the population, to their base needs. It's like lowest common denominator stuff. So like McDonald's tells you to eat more fat and salt, and that's not the best motive for flourishing, but what does that mean for why do you think that so much advertising is so focused on base instincts, short-term gains, and stuff like that? I'm interested in finding out, and I think that a great artist does create a need in people that they didn't think that they had before, and it can change things. It can change the way people feel about it. I think that, like for instance, like you said, person who figures out how to create a need that people didn't know that they had before. I think that happens all the time. Like for instance, I could say to you, pink giraffe, and you're thinking about a pink giraffe now, and I had that control over your mind. You're picturing it, you're seeing it, and I think that marketers know this, and they can choose to how they want. And I think it is a problem of like we were talking about earlier, of short-term versus long-term gratification. And why do you okay, I guess my biggest question for you right now is, why do you think that the majority of broad advertising is so base?
I don't know that I would categorize it that way, to be honest with you.
Okay.
A lot of it I would, but I wouldn't call it any more or less base than most art that I see that's not categorized as advertising. I've seen a lot of stuff that I just think is crappy aesthetically, or appeals to desires or feelings that I'm not really interested in both cases. But I think regardless, an iPhone and Apple commercials are appealing to a feeling, just like McDonald's commercials are. They're appealing to a whole variety of things. They're appealing to a sense of belonging, a feeling of community, sometimes a feeling of, hey, McDonald's is really quick and low cost. That's convenient for me. It saves me time and money, which lets me get to my kids' soccer game sooner, and therefore McDonald's makes it easier for me to be a better parent. My kids love McDonald's. If I give it to them, they will be happier with me. That makes it easier for me to have a good relationship with my kids. They're appealing to the same. I wouldn't even. Sometimes they might be base, but rarely can a company succeed by appealing to like hunger, shelter. I think sex is maybe the one exception to that, which seems to do a pretty good job of selling it regardless of the product. But I think they're all appealing to that feeling. And in terms of the selling out idea, I have an article called "Doing Work You Love and Being Happy Are Not Necessarily the Same Thing." Right. And this is something that I'm really interested in exploring, because I genuinely know people, Taylor, who they would tell me, I don't love to write. I write for money. I've learned to be good at it. I write whatever will get me paid, and that enables me to have a life that I absolutely love. And they are completely content with that. Or I write headlines that are clickbaity to get the clicks, because that gets me whatever, and that enables me to do the things that I love. And they are totally at peace with that. That's who they are. They're honest about it, and they're happy. I also know people who write to purely write for money or for whatever they think is going to get them, and they're totally unhappy, and they feel torn, and they feel like they're not being true to themselves. And I know the opposite. I know people who are like, I will never write things that just to be popular or to make money, and they're bitter all day that they're poor. And they're not happy about that decision. So they want to be the type of person who would never consider the values of the marketplace, because that sounds like somebody they wish they would like to be. But in reality, they're not happy being that person, and vice versa. I know people who can be happy being that person. And so there's sort of a quadrant of sort of 4 different categories. So I think any of those are possible. I don't think it's anything about the market or about the exchange of money that causes any of these problems. I think it's all about the individual artist and creator and their own level of self-knowledge with what's really going to bring them the most fulfillment. I mean, I know for me, I love music. The way that I love music is a way that I couldn't maintain if I tried to be a professional musician. If I connected my love of music with my need to make money, I think it would ruin both of them for me. It's one of those things where I don't feel that way with my passion for entrepreneurship and education. I feel like those marry very well with my sort of my work, my vocation. So I think it mostly resides in the individual artist.
I agree. I another thing about music that I wanted to talk about was since you mentioned it, I listen to music that would be total, like the motives behind it and the way it makes me feel would be really, really destructive if I carried that out in my daily life.
That's interesting.
One of my favorite types of feelings that I get from music, which is a totally negative sort of emotion, and if you carry it out all the time, is righteous indignation. I'm constantly enjoying listening to music that makes me feel like I can't believe it's sort of like a catharsis. But there's an interesting theory that there's the psychology of catharsis is sort of changing. We're realizing that if you constantly are cathartic, you're training your mind to feel negative feelings, and you're more likely to carry out those negative feelings in your daily life. So do you think that that's valuable art? And I'm very likely to buy it. I or listen to it on Spotify and give them, a very tiny fraction of money.
Man, that's an interesting. Well, I mean, how do you balance that for yourself? Do you ever find that if you consume that too much, it starts to affect you in a negative way? Do you have to draw some limit somewhere for yourself?
I honestly don't know, because before I thought that catharsis was good, and I kind of was just shrug my shoulders and say whatever.
That tends to be my default reaction to it, is like every once in a while you need to blow off some steam.
Yeah, but there's a lot of new evidence that's sort of turning that's like Freudian psychology, and it's sort of turning that on its head, and you're sort of creating wires, to put it simply, in your mind to feel that more readily all the time. And so it's much better to distract yourself and think about something else instead of wallowing.
Man, my gut reaction to that is like extreme skepticism. Like, I mean, I have to put a limit on it. So I actually have a thread on Voxer, my favorite app for communicating with a bunch of friends, and it's our catharsis thread. Where like every once in a while we'll just get on there and just mock something or complain about something that's irritating us or whatever it is, and I love it. It's really valuable to me. But if I'm just like on there all day, then it becomes problematic. Like it's like a little release valve, a little outlet that lets me, maybe because I'm not a big enough person to just destroy those feelings altogether, I have to channel them somewhere, and this is the least damaging place to channel them. I don't know. That's really interesting.
Maybe I'm kind of skeptical about the whole thing too. Maybe that you're able to kind of compartmentalize, and you only draw upon that connection that you've made in that certain setting, and that setting is sort of,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And if I almost feel like it's the old adage, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time around.
Yeah.
And if you have a friend who's like hilariously sarcastic and very cynical about everything, if you spend a lot of time with people like that, it's always enjoyable, but you can sometimes feel like, man, I'm starting to lose my optimism, and I like that about myself. I gotta be careful here. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Okay, so we've gone for a long time, and I know we got to wrap up. We're gonna have to just do like, give me like 3 minutes on psychedelics.
Okay.
What is the value of psychedelics, and who should explore psychedelics?
I think that if you feel, I don't know, I don't want to go out and give recommendations and be responsible for that.
Yes, the Isaac Morehouse podcast is not recommending anything specifically. This is purely our own conversational exploration.
But if I was having a personal conversation with a friend, and I don't know if this helps the recommendation and all. But if I were talking to a friend, I would say if you feel like you're ready, you should definitely try it, because I've had one experience. I'm not very big on drugs or escapism.
So you're very new to this. What led you to try this psychedelic experience? What led you to say I'm willing to do this?
It was actually influences, indirect influences. My very good friend listens to a lot of podcasts about UFC fighter. I don't actually even know his name, which is
Joe Rogan.
No, it's not Joe Rogan. It's somebody who.
I know he's not a fighter, but he's a. Oh, I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm losing the name too.
Yeah, well, he does it once every 6 months or so, and he really recommends, because of course I did a lot of research on this and just kind of looked into what people were saying about it, and I think that before there's certain drugs that used to be really prevalent in society, and they used to be a huge part of the way that people's minds functioned, and I think that we've sort of lost that, and I think that there's a part of our brains that sort of desires sort of the grand spiritual experience, and I think that religions, almost all of them, used to use drugs to sort of induce that sort of grand spiritual experience. And so, I mean, the experience for me was one of the most important experiences in my life. I wouldn't want to do it all the time, because I think what it does for me is you take everything that you're subconsciously conflicted about from living in the real world day to day, and it brings it all out to the surface so you can sort through it. And if you did it all the time, you would sort of retract from the real world, and I think that would be negative.
What substance did you use?
It was psilocybin.
Okay. And I always hear that set and setting are very important. What was the context in which this happened?
The friend I've mentioned, him and my girlfriend drove to Austin, which is 6 hours from where we lived at the time, and we did an Airbnb, got a whole house next to the lake. I think is it Lake Travis? I don't know. It was right next to it. We had the whole house for a few days, and it was like this old rundown house with all this spiritual iconography everywhere, and strange colors and paintings everywhere, and it was honestly a perfect place to do it. And I just had, we all had very profound experiences, and when we're feeling anxious, I talk to them about it all the time. A lot of times when we're feeling anxious or conflicted about where we're going and how we're moving forward, that's sort of like a
touchstone.
A place, touchstone. That's good. For us to sort of look at and gain perspective about it. I think in a lot of ways, subtle and overt, as in this experience, it's important to gain sort of a broader perspective.
Is there any sort of one takeaway or lesson from that experience, or is it so much that you're still sort of processing it?
I am processing it, and I think the reason that it's not well known to a lot of people is because it is definitely beyond your ability to verbally express it. It's because it puts a lot of imagery for me at least, it put a lot of imagery to my personality and my qualms, and it helped me to visualize it even now, and sort of see how this reacts with this whenever I'm feeling this way, so that it never takes away the way that you're feeling. You're always going to be, if you're an anxious person, you're probably always going to have to deal with your anxiety. But it just gives you a great set of tools to help you deal with that, or deal with whatever you might be trying to get through.
Taylor, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and all the topics that we covered. You got the wheels turning. There's many more conversations that could spin out of this. So thank you so much, and keep up the great work with Praxis.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You bet.